Hello and welcome to the Decking Awesome Games podcast, where we talk about how to create your own board game, our journey through the board game industry, and chat about board game culture in Ireland. My name is Owen, and I'm joined by the awesome Ciara and Brian.
Hello.
Hello.
Today we are talking about getting started with board games and how we like to run our game nights. We're going to discuss why we find it fun, where to start, and how to run an awesome game night. So, what makes a good board game night?
I suppose when you have a group of people who all like very similar games, it makes it quite easy. So, like if you have a group of people who are all starting out relatively new and aren't willing to commit to a marathon night of gaming, maybe lighter, fun games are a great way to introduce people and let everyone kind of focus on the fun side of it more than heavy strategy. And I suppose tailoring it to the audience is a great way to do it.
Yeah, because some people will have big knowledge of board games and they'll have played quite a lot with their friends. Other people will be brand new. Sometimes you'll kind of mix two groups together, or you might have a new person join the group. And kind of just knowing who's going to be there on a board game night and tailoring it to that can help quite a lot. Just know your audience, yeah.
Yeah, you can usually run into one or two difficulties if you're inviting someone new who is only starting out with board games to a group that is heavily into something that's going to take about the next 6 hours. And that's usually where the dynamics of the game night fall apart. So, yeah, tailoring it to your audience is key.
Or even just making sure everyone's aware before board game night, the expectations of the game. So if you're going to bring out Twilight Imperium, just make sure that everyone knows it's going to take several days to finish a game. But if everyone's into that, then people can be prepared and mentally they can change their kind of approach and they'll be into it. They want to get stuck in. So that's good. One question you should be aware of when you're setting up your board game night is, does someone in the group know all the rules to all the games? Or at least one person?
Yeah, that's always a helpful one. There's nothing worse than taking out a new game going, oh, I've been really excited to play this, and then everyone sits and watches you read rules for the next half an hour in complete silence. And everyone seems to learn rules differently. Do you ever find that? Like one person will sit there and they'll skip to how to win and then they'll go back to how to start. And other people are carefully placing out all the pieces, making sure they have everything. And one person likes to just read it all the way through and get the gist of it. Another person is figuring it out as they go along and reading each section. And if you're not the person who's the exact same as the person who's reading it, it is infuriating.
Yeah.
Sitting there watching, well, just read the rules. Tell me what we're supposed to do. Stop touching things, just read.
Yeah, and you can get distracted as well if you're reading the rules and other people are messing around with the components. One of the good recommendations is to watch the YouTube video someone has created online for kind of showing off the rules in like a short way, but even a better way is to read the rules before the game night if you have the game, and maybe even play like a quick one round by yourself just so you understand the mechanics, and then when you show up that night you can just whip it out and go like, this is how you might not know how to set it up, but like you understand how the game works. Is it like a social deduction game? Are you trying to barter with people? Or is it just like a points and you're trying to build an engine kind of thing? Once you just understand that, people will be able to play. And they might not fully know the rules, but you'll be there as a kind of a steward to help them out.
One good thing, if one person knows all the rules, even if they're not the person that explains it, if you watch the Let's Play video with everyone else, at least then people can't fight with the person telling you the rules because they're a video and they don't care.
And it's really hard to concentrate when you're reading the rules, to actually explain the rules and read. So it can get pretty crazy. Just put too much pressure on yourself during the game night. The next question is, do you know how much time you'll have for the session? So if this is like after work, you're going to have to make sure that people can arrive to your house, leave. How much time are we talking about? If this is a weekend thing, are people arriving at lunch? Figure out how many kind of hours, generally speaking, and figure out, do you want to play like a medium-sized game several times, or do you just want to play Twilight Imperium once? Just make sure people have the same expectations. Also be wary that people will arrive late and people will want to leave early.
Yeah, I think like if you only have a couple of hours and you have one of those games that takes 3 hours just to get all the pieces on the table before you even start playing, and everyone's watching you do this and then goes, all right, well, I have to call it a night now, maybe we'll pick this up again, and you're looking at the table going, oh, I have to clear it off now. Even the times on the boxes aren't too bad, unless everyone's learning the game initially. That can usually add a bit of extra time to it that you hadn't really accounted for.
Because a 45-minute game, that's like it says 45 minutes on the side of the box, it usually is for your first game an hour and 15 minutes, and especially if no one knows the rules. So it can get tricky figuring out how much time. But the second game will be a lot quicker. The game will probably be partially set up already. So have a think about running a medium game several times that you find fun.
Yeah, things like Gloomhaven and Mansions of Madness and those long games, they have quite a lengthy setup time. I know Mansions of Madness has the app that helps, but just take into account that some of the more strategic games, you probably need to add on to the box time a kind of an estimated setup time, especially ones that you hear about having a really long setup time on the internet. Twilight Imperium as well. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, setup times, because there's one of my favorite games is called Dice Forge, and that has no setup time, and so you can just immediately start playing the game. The only problem is after the game is done, it takes a lot of time to get the original components off the dice. That can take a long time, so I recommend playing one game of Dice Forge and then just dealing with the aftermath after the board game.
Zero setup time, but huge amount of takedown time.
Yeah. Another good thing for a board game night is making sure everyone has snacks and food and drink. People need energy during the night. If it's after dinner, they'll probably still need some pick-me-ups and stuff.
Sweets, lots of sweets. Maltesers are great. Always just have a box of Maltesers on hand.
Yeah, I agree.
The group is obsessed with Maltesers, though. They are that is like the gold dust of our snack situation. People open boxes, big share boxes, and they're devoured in minutes.
If you're that person who brings grapes or celery sticks to a game night,
yeah, but
don't expect an invite back.
There are nice fruit though, like strawberries are really good. Lots of cool fruit like that is nice, and I would say they're super healthy. Eating 50 strawberries isn't going to be the healthiest thing in the world, but at least it's better than a whole family pack of Maltesers to yourself.
It's surprisingly energy consuming. So strategic games, all that thinking for some reason burns a lot of calories. Not sure if that's a thing, but it seems to make me exhausted. And social deception games, trying to remember what I'm lying about, that's hard.
Yeah. I also take into account that people could be coming straight from work, and you might have to order pizza or Chinese food or something like that. Make sure that when the food arrives and you're halfway through a game, just jot down whose go it is on a piece of paper or what they've been doing or stuff like that, because everyone gets focused on the pizza. The pizza's arrived. Forget about this game. But then once you get back to the game, you have to make sure that you can just keep playing.
You can always, if you're going for longer games or a full day of gaming, you can always factor it in. So you might say we'll start playing at 3, we'll get pizza around 6, and then maybe wrap it up around 10 or 11. And then at least kind of gives you a break up to the day. You can maybe plan your games accordingly if you really want, or else just drop everything in the middle of it and write down whose turn it was.
Make sure that you give people a chance to leave the game board, because no one wants greasy hands all over their board games. True.
You want a separate area to kind of eat the pizza in. Wouldn't recommend eating pizza while playing a game. That just gets too messy, and there's usually not enough space on the table to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, an absolute essential above anything else is having a board game table. Drop 3, 4, 5 grand on it, whatever you need to, but make sure you have it so you can cover it over and you can eat pizza and then take the cover off and your game is good to go. Essential. Don't even think about starting a board game night unless you've spent 5 or 6 grand on a table.
I'm just saying, we have a board game table. We have never closed it for... We've always gone into the sitting room, okay? So, I don't know who you're preaching to here.
Okay, maybe you don't need to drop that kind of money on a board game table.
Yeah, pretty useful board game tables. But yeah, a kitchen table probably is about the same. If this is your first board game night with a new group, and they're all kind of... some of them might be your friends, some of them might be work colleagues, but this is a whole new board game night. Make sure to keep the first session lighthearted. Don't get stuck into a 3-hour-long game. Start off with something kind of easy to get people into it, like a small kind of card game or a social deception game. Something new, something that people haven't played before, something that people want to get their teeth stuck into. After the first session, you'll start to understand what people like, and then they might have their own recommendations and stuff that they haven't talked about.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. If you make sure the first one is just fun, light-hearted, makes people want to come back more. instead of like, okay, fair enough, if everyone coming over for the first time happens to be an avid board gamer and you've just never played together before, great. But if you're having new people over or you're trying out a new night of board gaming, the light-hearted games make it fun and make you want to come back, and then you're maybe willing to try the longer, more thinky games later on. Whereas if you're not really sure if you like board games or not, and then you get sat down in the middle of a marathon Twilight Imperium game and you're sitting there going, I'm not enjoying this, I don't know why I came here, board games obviously aren't for me. Maybe it's just about finding the right ones.
There's so many different types of board games out there, so many different types of mechanics. At least with the small starty offy games, they usually focus on one mechanic and they do it quite well. And in the bigger, larger games, they will focus on how all these different mechanics kind of intermingle and work together. And if you aren't fully aware what these mechanics are, or you're not sure, then that can be too much sometimes. Okay, so the next thing is, do you have enough space for everyone and the games? Because this is not something that people really think about when they start up a board game session. But if you have a board game, make sure that you can lay it out on your kitchen table and you can fit everybody comfortably. Because, if you're talking about 6 players, I know my table doesn't fit 6 players. So the game has to be quite small, like a social deception game where people can hide a card that who they are and they can just keep it in their hand. Whereas if it's Terra Mystica or something like that, it's a large board game space. Everyone has their own little kind of player board, and that can take up a lot of space. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what games should we pick for the board game session. So if you are new to board game industry and you're trying to set up a session because you just want to try something new, try something social, it can be kind of intimidating to figure out what board game to pick. Obviously, going into a board game shop, talking to a guy just to kind of explain this, they'll probably give you some recommendations as to what you want. But I think you should be able to find board games that might interest you in the shop. Have a look at the back of the board game and you might be able to get a general gist as to what their team is and how it plays. And if it interests you, it probably will interest your friends too. So you can always check out Board Game Geek online to see what people are talking about it, like reviews. And then if you think it'll fit the party style, and that's a pretty good way of finding a good game.
Yeah, and Board Game Geek has complexity levels on it. Like, there are complicated worker placements and there are easy worker placements, and complicated social deception games and really easy social deception games. So just because you maybe have an idea of what style of game you want to play, don't feel like you have to dive right into something complicated. Find something light to see how engaged the rest of the group is on that sort of game. Like, if you are going into something like social deception, having a few rounds of coup before you play anything bigger or Secret Hitler or Resistance, it kind of gives you an idea. Like, if everyone is just kind of loses interest halfway through, that maybe it's not worth your while investigating in something more complicated. I think that's really especially true of things like worker placement. So I know a lot of people get in with like Catan or Carcassonne into board games, which are like very traditional worker placement style ones. Some people just like them because they have a bit more depth than the other games that they've previously played, and maybe that's not exactly the style that they want. So having a few short games of different styles that are easy to play can give people a better idea of what there is out there.
If someone plays Catan or Carcassonne, it's hard to know if they like the specific worker placement mechanic or if they just like playing board games with their friends. And sometimes it doesn't really matter which is which, but giving people variety can help them out figure that out for themselves.
As you said, a great way to do it is to go in and just talk to the guys in the shop. Tell them what games you like. I'm sure they'll be able to recommend very similar games or games along that line, or if you like this, you might like this. You can also, drop into the shop, have a look around, see what games you like, maybe come home, watch a YouTube video on them, and then go back and pick them up. Support your local shops.
Another one is to get the list of genres in board games and then just go in and ask them, can you please recommend a simple one of this genre? And they'll be able to do that as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. You can probably just Google what the list of genres of board games are. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're very new to this and this is like your first night, then you might not have games you prefer. So lots of little light ones are good.
Yeah, if you've never really played board games before and here you are listening to How to Make a Board Game podcast, fair play to you. Thank you.
And another one is kind of physical board games, like Flick 'em Up. those sorts of games are really good if you have a day planned and you know that the people in your group are kind of like high energy people. You might say that after 4 hours sitting at a table playing games, you might want to play something where you have to like get up and walk around the table, or you have to like move a lot. So there are options. Jungle Speed as well, where you have to grab the little token in the middle. That can be quite energetic, even though you're just grabbing something, but you're grabbing it really fast and like to the detriment of everyone else. So it's good to just consider something like that if you want to add in a little bit even more variety.
Yeah, those type of dexterity games can be great ones to start off with while you're waiting for everyone to arrive, because the majority of them you can just add people in. It's not like once you start the game there's no way to add in an extra player. Like in Flick 'em Up, you just, okay, it's your turn now, you just flick something across the table at them. Or, you know, Mars Golf Open, finish out the hole, play a new one, throw in an extra player. Doesn't make a difference. They're great ones to have people join in as everyone's joining in. If you're newer to board games, maybe you think of them more along the lines of Monopoly, Risk, that kind of thing. You don't expect a physical game where you're flicking something around. And I suppose Subbuteo used to be a game.
Subbuteo was quite a popular game, and like it still is available in shops.
I don't know, do people consider that a board game?
Oh,
yeah. I know, it is. It definitely is. But
it's like foosball, whatever that one is.
Yeah.
Is that a board? That's not a board game, because like...
Yeah, then is ice hockey a board game? I don't know. Well, not ice hockey, whatever that thing is.
Air hockey. I feel like we're going down a whole different...
Okay, let's get back on track.
If you're looking to invite friends over and you're buying an air hockey table to try and get them into board games, you've gone the wrong way.
Definitely. Although I would love an air hockey, that'd be pretty cool, but it would just take up too much space. Another idea for setting up a good board game night is to have all the board games fit into the same mechanic, or even the same team across the whole thing. So if you're having a social deception game like Coup at the start, maybe have another social deception game later on, and then slowly build it up. And then as people keep playing, they will understand the mechanics as the game night goes on. Mind you, always be careful, because if someone doesn't like social deduction, then you got to change things pretty quickly. If you know that people like a specific mechanic, whether it's worker placement or rolling dice, just try and create a game night based on that. Let's start talking about some recommendations for like a board game night. So I tried to keep mine staying with a cooperative team. So all these games have everybody in the table playing against the game. I thought is something you don't see a lot in the board game hobby. So there's lots of cool choices out there, and it's always fun because instead of having player on player hostility, everyone has to work together. It feels great. So I'd start off the game night with Hanabi, which is a game where you have to make the best fireworks, and everyone can't see their own hand, so they can see everyone else's hand. So it's very cool, where you have to kind of subtly tell people how to do things, and the rules are really good. Then it's Pandemic. You know, if it wasn't for our current pandemic, this would be quite a nice game to have in a board game session. Probably wouldn't. It's a bit
sold out. It's sold out in so many places.
Yeah.
Like on Ireland online games and the board game stores, they were sold out and they're on back order. So
I saw a friend landed a copy there on Instagram, but they were saying they bought it like 2 months ago. It's only just shown up today.
It's a really good game, and there's lots of different variations on it. There's like campaign style pandemics and all sorts of other ones. And then I'd finished the night with Ghost Stories, which is not well liked, but it is incredibly difficult, and you lose almost every time. But if you ever do win, it's very satisfying. That was the Ghost Stories. I would consider more of a long-term game or like a hard game. So, you know, start off with the easy stuff like an Abbey, then you go to medium Pandemic, and then you end up with the complex game Ghost Stories. And then based on your time, you might just end up playing a few games of Pandemic instead, and then never touching Ghost Stories. Or you might have your own board game session just dedicated to Ghost Stories, and it's up to you. So, Brian, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, we kind of discussed it earlier. When I'm starting a game night, I like to go with something light or something like a dexterity game. Either Colt Express, which is a great little kind of programming one. Very easy to pick up. It's good fun. There's always a twist and a change in it. People are convinced they've got great plans and then it goes out the window. So it's always nice to have a bit of fun and frustration and screwing other people over as well. Once you kind of get everyone settled, everyone's had a bit of fun and you want to build into a kind of bigger game. For newer people, I like games like Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is a great game. Very easy to pick up, and you can get the gist of it very quickly to start going. Maybe you won't be brilliant your first time out, but I mean, I've played it God knows how many times and I'm still not brilliant, so who knows. Then Oh, My Little Scythe is a good one as well. Scythe is a big, heavy game. My Little Scythe is a fun one where you're playing with raccoons throwing pies at rabbits. It's it's a great little fun one, but it also kind of introduces a few more mechanics and mechanics with mechanics. So it adds a little bit of complexity to what is an easy enough game to pick up. Towards the end of the night, I know the guys are saying open with a nice, quick, short, easy game. I like to finish with one because, when you get towards the end of the night, maybe half an hour or an hour before everyone intended to leave, and you don't want to start into another big hour or 2 hour long game. But like if you play a little quick game like Coup or Zombie Dice or Love Letter or something like that, it's a great little way to finish because people aren't ready to finish straight away, but you can play another game. If it goes quickly, maybe you can play a game or two and you can kind of use them to wrap up the night and help you finish at a reasonable hour while still getting maximum amount of gaming in.
Yeah, I love that. Those are really good recommendations. So Ciara, what do you recommend?
So Love Letter, definitely high on my list. I think that's a really, really great one to start with because you lose quickly and the rounds are short. So if people are kind of trying to get into it, remember how to play things, settling in for the night, it's a good one to get everyone into just having a bit of fun without anyone getting too upset about losing a really long game or winning or getting obsessed with winning a really long game. So we use that a good bit to start on a game night while we're waiting for people to show up. So I'm a big fan of worker placement games. I love Stone Age. I think that's a really good one for new people. I think there's a few different ways to win. Everyone is kind of just worried about their own resources. There's a little bit of overlap in what you can get on the board. There's enough interaction that it keeps it interesting, but not too much that if people are starting out, they're going to feel like everyone is out to get them. And then Castles of Burgundy is one of my favorite worker placement games. I think just because of the variety, they have like loads of these starter boards, and it means that you can replay again and again, and you still get enjoyment out of it. So you learn the rules once, you can try a few different times if you like the game to play again. So I think other than trying to convince other people to play worker placement games, I definitely really enjoy playing them with a bit of variation. And then I love Blood Rage as well. I think that's a really, really interesting one. So that's kind of a worker placement, but it's probably more attacking each other and that sort of interaction. But everyone can win using different tactics. I think that what I like about the worker placement games that I've mentioned and Blood Rage is that there's a lot of different options for winning. In Stone Age, you can invest in tools and equipment rather than bothering to invest in resources, or maybe you invest in agriculture. You kind of have a few options and they're all valid ways to win. It's really balanced as a game. So you can try each tactic and you have a fair chance. And Blood Rage is kind of the same. Even though it's a tactical game and there's a lot of different fighting and things, you can win by dying all the time. Losing battles is a perfectly valid way to win Blood Rage. So I like that.
In Stone Age, always buy wheat. Always go for wheat. No other options. Just invest in wheat.
Those games, Ciara, they see the table quite a lot, so they are very recommended. Yeah, it's funny because I think Love Letter is one of the first games kind of play as a board game group, and it constantly sees the table because of nostalgia, but also because we all know the rules, but also because it's very easy to play. So yeah, you probably will find your own Love Letter, whatever it is. But we just find that everyone in our group loves Love Letter, so we kind of play it a lot. And yeah, and variety in board games is so important when it comes to getting it to the table, because people don't want to play a game where the style of play that they use isn't kind of represented inside the game. But Stone Age, Blood Rage, they are really good, and Castles of Burgundy, they're really good ones where you can kind of pick whoever you want. I'm kind of very aggressive when I play, and those kind of games, they have an outlet for me, even though I tend not to win. So, at least I have some sort of outlet to play.
The reason Ciara picks these games is because Ciara wins these games a lot.
And that's not about winning, it's about having fun, right?
I don't always win.
Ciara always seems to have slightly more fun. It helps that she wins.
Yeah, that's true. I'm only focusing on the fun part because I lose all the time. But that's fine.
I think Blood Rage has a fair
win rate. Yeah.
Brian is definitely better at Stone Age than he was at the start. He's won more times recently than he won at the start.
One of the good things about Blood Rage is you can be very tactical about it, and those tactics do help. But also, if you're brand new to the game and you just kind of feel like you want to be like defensive or you want to be aggressive, those naturally let you have a good chance of winning. So lots of first-time players of Blood Rage, they have a good chance of winning. So that's very good. You don't need to have in-depth knowledge of the game to win. So do we have any other tips for board game night?
I suppose, like, if you're looking for people to play games with, if you're considering setting up or starting your own board games night, you'd be amazed how many people out there at some point have been dragged into a board game night with their friends. They'll sit there and tell you, oh, I played this one game where I put little people out and I gained resources and it was great fun. I've no idea what it was called, but I really enjoyed playing it. It'll never even occur to them to go and look up the game or to buy different games or to organize their own game nights because they might not own any. So if you're interested in starting up a board game night, ask around. You'd be amazed how many people definitely be up for it. You can always get a few people who are interested or a few who've played board games before but have never really done it regularly or that much.
A lot of people have played board games and they are not comfortable setting up a board game night or anything like that because, you know, it might have been someone else's board game, or they might not know how to fully play the game, or they might not know all the rules. Yeah, you'd be surprised how interested people are in board games.
Another really good thing to keep in mind is make sure you have a game that can accommodate the amount of people you invite. So I think maybe you have a load of people who are really interested. Inviting them all might mean you have too many players for the games that you want to play. And on a board game night, usually everyone wants to play one game together. So maybe splitting the group up isn't really an option. Then before you invite everyone, check out what sort of games you have, or try and organize it so that maybe you have different nights for different games so that people can kind of opt in. It can be quite hard after over 6 players to get games that everyone's going to enjoy. We have a few 7 and a few 8-player games, but we struggle when we have 2 really big groups in a row and we have to pick different games because we've probably played all the games we have for 8 players the first night.
Yeah, because once you're talking about above 6 players, you're kind of talking like Secret Hitler or Werewolf or kind of big party games, which can be kind of frustrating because you can't pick all the mechanics you want to pick, which might make you feel like you should split the group. I probably wouldn't recommend it. If you don't have someone kind of in control of both the groups, you know, one of the groups is just constantly harassing the other group for like, how do we play this game? And it can get kind of hard. And also, like, board game nights can get really popular. So, like, you know, if you have invited 5 people over and you think I got a really good 5-player game, and then all them invite their +1s, and then you're like, sure, why not? And then suddenly you got 8 players sitting around a table. It's hard to figure that out, but it's something you should definitely think about.
Like Owen said, there's a lot of social deduction games that are a lot of players. There's a few like code names and stuff that are kind of party games, but it's quite hard to find worker placements. Like 7 Wonders goes up to 7 players, and there's a few more, but the problem is the more people you have, the longer it takes to get to your go. So worker placement games, they don't tend to be as popular with such large numbers because there's such a wait. Yeah,
which is why games like Werewolf and Secret Hitler are quite popular, because, you know, there's no actual goals really, and so you're just kind of accusing other people of being Hitler or a werewolf, and so it's everyone's go all the time. Those kind of games are very good for bigger groups of people.
Yes, if you are one of these lucky folk who's blessed with dozens of friends who all come over at the same time, and not, you know, trying to plan 3 months in advance just to meet 3 people at once, then, you know, maybe have a look at party games, because games even like Cards Against Humanity is a very accessible game for everyone. Secret Hitler, as we were saying, there are a lot of party games out there that you can play with large numbers of people that are great to even get people interested in the type of board games that are out there. And you might find, you know, you have 12 people over, you play a big game of Werewolf, and you might have 4 or 5 of them go, oh, look, I'd love to get together and play a different board game next time. And then you've got a nice smaller group that you can play with again.
That's a good point. Yeah, you can always have a party game as the first one, see if people like it. I think that about wraps it up for getting started with board games. You can probably notice from our audio quality that it's a little bit worse. That's because we're all recording in our own homes over Zoom. This is because of, obviously, COVID. So now, if you're ever stuck at home with some friends or family, maybe now is a good time to kind of buy a board game you see on Amazon or anything like that and give it a shot yourself. But yeah, stay safe out there, guys. And if you want to share your memories and experiences of your board game nights, then feel free to comment down below. We've been Decking Out Some Games. You can find us on most social media. Thanks for listening. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.